Welcome to Virtual Lunch. We missed you last week, and it's good to be back. We are going to get started with our guests here in just a few minutes. As always, I've got some news and some tidbits, but I don't know about you, but the seasons are changing rapidly here in Kansas City. We had 80 degrees one day last week, and we're in shorts, and then yesterday it snowed. So we have very interesting environment here these days. But anyway, so go ahead and put your name and where you're joining in from in the comments, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I always like to share a few little fun tidbits with you, something interesting that I've come across in the news. And so this week I saw that Fisher-Price, the toy company, is doing a virtual toy museum of nostalgic toys. This is their 90th anniversary this year. And so they've decided to put together this museum of historic toys. So I don't know about you, but probably my biggest memory of Fisher-Price toys when I was little was the little people, first of all, and the barn. Remember the barn? And you'd open the door and it would moo at you. Of course, I grew up on a farm, so maybe that was part of why it was interesting to me. But anyway, that always fascinated me. So there's the link to the Virtual Toy Museum article. But anyway, so, and then they also have a virtual gift shop. So they've got all kinds of nostalgic stuff in there. But anyway, so kind of clever stuff. So anyway, and I don't know if Chuck is here. Chuck, if you're here, I know he's one of our regulars. So if you're here, say hi. But I know something about Chuck. He last week did a porch fest in St. Louis, and they had, 21 bands played on different porches around the neighborhood. And so people could, come out on the lawn, put, chairs on the sidewalk or the driveway or whatever and enjoy the concert. So I thought that was really cool and clever. So anyway, Chuck, if you're here, tell us, hop on the chat and tell us how that went, because I've been curious. One thing that has been, well, it's not just a problem in virtual, but it's starting meetings on time. And I don't know if you're like me. I've been seeing a lot of people that it's like, okay, where is everybody? Why aren't we starting? And so it seems to be a problem now that people are not, meetings are not starting on time. But like I said, it's not just virtual. So this article about how to start online meetings on time, I thought had some really good points. But what was interesting, where the thread online where I saw this shared, one of the comments that was in there, she shared that one thing they did in their office was they made anybody coming in late to the meeting had to sing Old MacDonald. So she said that kind of cured them real quick. Coming in late to the meeting. So, and then there were some other great ideas, making people put money in a kitty and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the just food for thought of what to do. Rama is here from Lev Promotions in San Diego. Hi, Rama. Always good to have you in the cafe. Let's see. Oh, this article actually was shared by today's guest, Mel White. This is how to word a compliment so that it can be life-changing. And I thought it was really interesting. It's nothing that's like really revolutionary, but it's just how to frame a compliment so that it carries even more weight and has more impact. So I thought this was really cool. So thanks, Mel, for sharing that. And then back to talking about the virtual world and cybersecurity. This is something that I hadn't really thought about. Well, I maybe thought about a little bit, but not being part of a company, I hadn't really thought about it. But the security of a remote workforce and a lot of different things. I mean, you've got cybersecurity, you've got document security. And so this article talks about sensitive data and, dealing with sensitive data and passwords. Of course, we always think of that. But one thing the part that I hadn't thought of is called Internet Things, which if you're not familiar with that term, that's all the other gadgets around your house, your thermostat, if you have like a Nest thermostat. Some people, even their refrigerator is connected to the internet. So all of these things. And just a few years ago, there was a situation where there was a hacking that happened that hacked into the Internet of Things, or what's called IoT. And they were able, the hacker was able to get in and access these other kinds of devices, because they're not as secure as maybe your computer is, because you're through a firewall. At least I hope you're using a firewall in your personal network and that it's locked down and password protected. But the Internet of Things kind of leaves the door open a little bit for hackers to get in. So anyway, this is a very good article for you to take note of, the cybersecurity article. Kenji, hey, welcome, Kenji, coming from the great indoors. Yes. Those of you who don't know Kenji, he's known for the great outdoors. So I bet this has really been tough for you, because you are an outdoors person, Kenji. All right, so let's see, what else do we have? Okay, events and hospitality industry needs assistance. We all know that, but this was an opinion piece that was written by Aaron Bludworth from Fern. Very, very well written. So if you haven't seen this article yet, and oh, by the way, for those of you that are on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can click the read more button in the description, and all the links are there for you. And then my husband, Alan, as always, is putting up the links for us as we go on Facebook. So, but anyway, this opinion piece that Aaron wrote was, I thought, just very, very well put, and just lays it out there of where our industry is, and where do we go from here. All right, so I don't see that link there yet. Okay, well. We have a new setup here. The laptop fried, and so we got a new computer, and so Alan is now sharing an office with me, so I can actually see his computer from here. And something happened, and it went to the wrong page. So, but those of you on YouTube, the link is there. So we'll get that one put up later on the Facebook side. And then in Vegas, nothing ever goes as planned. It's always, it's kind of funny, kind of sad, I guess. But the Vegas loop that Elon Musk is doing, and I don't know how this happened, but anyway, they've now found out that fire regulations won't let them transport as many people as they thought at a time. And so what they had promised of the number of people per hour that they were going to transport isn't possible. I'm like... Why didn't you check that one out sooner? But anyway, so because of that, it could result in hefty fines, because they don't have that capability. So anyway, so there's a more in-depth article on that situation. Although I guess the one bright side out of all this right now is they're not going to have to transport hundreds and hundreds of people each hour, sadly, but they got a little more time to figure it out, I guess, is the upside to that one. And then the next article is about how destinations may draw meetings back using some interesting industry connections. They're going to tap into some industry pros. So, and not necessarily trade show industry pros, but like, say the tech industry. So they tap into tech industry pros, and they have them at both emitters, so that they're reaching out to their industry to try to help to draw, so say it's the tech industry. So trying to draw tech related events to that city, or also having them prepared to be speakers, so that, if a conference does want to come to a particular city and they have tech industry experts there, then they can, save on flying in speakers or whatever. So anyway, I just thought it was kind of clever that they're doing that. And having those people, participate and be a part of that promotion. Oh, Chuck, I see you're here now. I don't know if you were here earlier. We were talking about you. I shared your Porch Fest, uh, I guess we'd say mobile concert or what do I want to say? Drive-by concert? I don't know. So anyway, I thought it was really cool. So if you want to tell us how that turned out, that would be cool. Okay, so let's see. I think our last link that I have here is there's still new growth in convention centers and in venues. There's still things happening and stuff coming online. So Green Bay is actually working on a new expo center, which will open in January. Let's see. I don't see that link yet, but anyway, so if you've ever been to Green Bay, Alan and I were there once. It is not a very big place, but they've got a brand new expo center and it will have a view of the stadium, the famous stadium, which, that's probably the biggest draw in Green Bay. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting that there is still good news coming out of various cities where and we touched on this, I forget if it was last time or anyway, recently we talked about several different convention centers that were expanding or renovating or whatever. So there is new growth happening. So it looks like this might be our link for the opinion page that I talked about earlier that Aaron Bludworth wrote. So anyway, so we've got that link now. So I want to point out about schedule coming up. Oh, hey, Chuck and Kenji, you both play in neighborhood groups. So Kenji's group is the Pandemic Porch Players every Friday. Wow. Well, I have an idea. I'll have to file that one away for future. But what I want to tell you is we're going to take next week off for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think most everybody's probably going to have other things on their mind and on their agenda that day. So besides that, I've got more client projects I'm going to be working on next week. So we'll take next week off. Then we'll do 2 weeks in November, 2 Tuesdays. Then we'll take off Thanksgiving week. Then we'll be back for the first 2 weeks of December, first 2 Tuesdays. And on December 8th, I have something a little bit different in mind. So I'll be sharing more details on that as we get closer, but I wanted to do something a little bit fun and different for kind of a holiday end of year survival celebration, I guess you could say. So anyway, so I've got some ideas coming up on that. And Kevin is here from Classic. So welcome. Always good to have you here. Okay. So now we are going to bring on our guest. And so Mel White from Classic Exhibits. I've known Mel for a long time. We've worked on a number of different projects together. And a lot of you I know Mel as well. He's been a voice in the industry for a long time. He's very well connected in the industry. And he is currently the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for Classic Exhibits. But I found out today, actually, that he worked for 2 other exhibit design manufacturers before that. And then he took some time off. He left the industry and went into the tech world, but he couldn't resist and he came back. So anyway, so Mel White is here today and we are going to talk about designing exhibits as we go forward. So Mel, welcome to, I can't say welcome to Virtual Lunch, but welcome to the camera side of Virtual Lunch.
Well, thank you very much, Marlys. And did you know, Marlys, that your show is one of the highlights of my week every week?
Really? Well, thank you. Yeah, it's fun. I've been hearing that from a lot of people. And so that's one reason I've kept it going. I actually looked it up and today is show number 29.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we've been doing this since March and we're going to keep going. I don't know if I can keep doing it every week, but we'll definitely keep it going. So anyway, but thank you. That's very cool to hear. So, well, Mel, the reason I invited you on, well, other than the fact that you are a regular to Virtual Lunch and I've known you a long time and we always have a good conversation, but you recently wrote an article that was on LinkedIn, and Alan's going to actually share that link. But you were talking about how exhibits are going to need to change going forward. And let's see. And, I thought, you brought out some really good points and some things I hadn't thought of before. And then I also did a blog and podcast episode earlier this summer on adapting exhibits. And I thought, there's a lot of things people really aren't talking about. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that there's not more people. There's a lot of discussion on the show hall side and how the show floor is going to change and adapt. But there's not a lot of discussion on the exhibitor side. And first of all, why do you think that is? Why do you think nobody's really talking about it?
I think part of it is just the unknown, is that we're just so focused right now on the exhibit hall and GBAC and those kind of things that people haven't made that leap forward. And that's not to say that exhibit designers haven't. And really, this whole article was prompted by one of our distributors who asked us, what do you think will change? And I'm not an exhibit designer, but what I did is I reached out internally to our exhibit designers and to others in the industry. And the messaging was pretty consistent across the board as far as what they thought would change in exhibit design. But they also recognized that there's a lot of known and there's a great deal of unknown that's out there.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we're all shooting in the dark here. I mean, whether it's the show floor side or the exhibitor side, none of us know for sure, but there are some things that we can definitely start looking at and getting prepared for, right?
We can. And so let's just take a moment and let's play a little game. All right?
Okay.
All right. So the part that we know is we know the show hall portion. At least we know some of those knowns. All right. So I'm going to name one of those knowns, and then if you can name one of those knowns after that, and start it with "we know that." All right.
Okay.
So the first one is we know that there'll be temperature checks at the entrance of the show hall. Yeah.
We know that there will be wider aisles.
Exactly. We also know that there'll be hand sanitizers throughout the exhibit hall.
Yes. We know that there will be a lot more signage and markings of where to be.
Yes. We know that there will probably be touchless registration for the exhibit or for the show. Okay.
We know that there will be socially distanced, what do I want to say? Positioning of everything.
All right. So we know that there's likely, depending on the number of attendees who are showing up, that they'll be scheduled as far as when they can be there and when they can't be there. So not everyone is attending at the same time.
And we know that there will be one-way entrance and one-way exits.
And we know that there will probably be a series of safety barriers or dividers somewhere within the exhibit hall to kind of steer people down certain paths, in addition to simply having more signage.
Right. So I don't know what else we know.
Well, we know that masks will be required.
Oh, yes, that's a given.
Okay.
Yes.
So knowing what we know from that, how does that translate into the exhibit design itself? So when an exhibit designer is looking at the booth, what does that mean for him or her as far as looking at the booth? And I think some of the obvious first one is obviously there's going to be hand sanitizers within the exhibit itself, right? In addition to what's on the show floor. But hand sanitizers are kind of ugly. They're not very attractive, So if you have them in your booth, and if you're an exhibit designer, how do you have them in the booth but minimize the visual impact of those hand sanitizers in there, right? And I think some of it is that it has to be visible, but you can do vinyl, you can do things so that it blends in with the theme of the exhibit itself. You can put it on counters or put it lower on counters so that it's accessible, but it's not sitting like right in the middle of the booth itself. All right.
Right. And blending it in with the design. So it's not just, here's a hand sanitizer.
Exactly. So if you have like trafficking within the show hall, will you have some kind of one-way entrances and one-way exits within the booth itself? Well, that's probably a little difficult on inlines, but it probably isn't unfeasible for island exhibits for them to start designing them. So there's really only one way to come in and one way to entrance, and then kind of a path to lead them through to maximize it. Wouldn't you think that that would be kind of one of the things they would be thinking of?
Yeah, that's where I would assume that booths would be going. And we've got some participation from the audience here. Chuck says we know there will initially be smaller booth footprints. So, I want to kind of adapt that a little bit to where it may not be smaller booth footprints, but it will be less like less stuff in the booth. So like if somebody usually has a 10 by 30, they may still have a 10 by 30, but it's going to be scaled very differently.
Yes, I think there'll be absolutely less congestion, less items within the booth itself, so that there's more room, more social distancing in the booth itself. You know, one of the things that I think of is I think of when I was at Euroshop, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and one of the exhibit halls within Euroshop was a mannequin. It was solely devoted to mannequins, and I had no idea that there was a massive industry about mannequins and the mannequin design. And it was such a competitive industry that when you went into that hall, all the exhibits had curtains around every single booth. And there was only one way to get into the booth and one way to get out of the booth. And they made it very exclusive. I can see exhibit designs having some kind of exclusive element that, as far as invitations and as far as timing, that the only time you can go into that booth is when you have an appointment at a certain time with a certain person. Right.
And I have seen over the years, I have seen a few exhibitors that have executed that really well, and more like kind of like a movie theater environment where they had literally had the red rope and you had to line up and then you were let in at a certain time and yeah, people couldn't just wander through. So yeah, when it's done right, it can be very effective. So a couple other things we have here. Kenji wonders, do we know that there will be wider aisles? Well, I guess that's still kind of up in the air, but I know the few shows that have been happening, I believe, have had, for the most part, had wider aisles.
I don't think there's really, I think when you look at it practically, it'll have to be wider aisles. We've all gone into the supermarket where they've tried to enforce one-way aisles, and it doesn't really work. People ignore it. People don't really pay attention to it. Even with the signage there, the wider aisles where people can kind of monitor themselves is probably more practical.
And Al says, we know there will be less attendees, which, Mel, you shared with me an article this morning, a quote that I thought was very good about there will be less attendees, but they will be very, I forget what the word was, but very serious and very diligent attendees that are there. So, you know, as I always tell exhibitors, it's like less attendees doesn't always mean a bad thing. Sometimes it's just that, you know, you get rid of all the fluff.
Yeah, I think, well, certainly the physical attendees will be much more focused, but that doesn't mean there'll be fewer attendees when you roll in the virtual part of it. Most of the shows will actually have more attendees, I think, over time than they've had in the past, when you combine the physical folks that are there and the virtual folks who are also attending, assuming that experience improves over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what the shows that are going virtual this year are finding, is that they've got a lot more people registering than what they have in the past, because so many people that couldn't physically come to the show are still able to attend. Boy, the comments are flying in fast here. Rama says, do you think allowing full capacity registration but requiring attendance in shifts for the show floor will require more show days to allow people actually see all the exhibitors they need to see? I actually have seen that for some of the shows that are still planning on doing face-to-face. I've seen some that have extended from like 3 days to 4 or something, because they are wanting to allow people that just time and distance, I guess you could call it. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I wonder how that works though with the educational portion of it. I mean, do You extend the educational portion of it. Certainly in our show, like Exhibitor Live, where people are there and trying to get their accreditation, or do you limit that to the same number of days, and that becomes your time slot for when you can actually go to the show, and everybody else goes to other times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these come together. She's got a follow-up here. If making those show floor appointments becomes a must without open entrance for us smaller exhibitors, I think we'll see a whole lot more outboarding pre and post show. Well, yeah, it's going to be a challenge to figure out how this is all going to fit together and be as fair as possible, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that isn't being talked about, aside from touchless registration and certainly the heat sensors, is the change in technology, because that's going to be much more rapid than it has been in the past. And you and I talked a few days ago, Marlys, about, if you remember 8 or 9 years ago, we all talked about QR codes, and QR codes went nowhere. Right? We thought that was going to be the thing. Well, QR codes are probably going to kind of come back to life, and you're going to see QR codes everywhere where people can use their own devices to get the information and not have to rely on somebody else.
Right.
Any of those kind of touchless technologies are going to be much more prevalent.
Right. And Kenji responds to Alan Rahman, maybe this means more flexible open hours for convention centers and venues. Yeah. And right now they don't have a backlog of events, so they probably have a little more flexibility in their schedules. Kevin, who you know quite well, Mel, Kevin Carty from Classic says, less exhibits overall might lead to more island rentals out of the gate, since they are affordable but still allow for a bigger presence on a more spaced out show floor. I have wondered if more exhibitors would go to just like even the small islands, just so that the exhibits themselves can be socially distanced from each other. Your thoughts?
I think that's a good point. But I think you're going to see, at least for the first year or two, a lot of people will choose rentals simply because it's, as Kevin said, it's a more affordable option. And it's also their way of kind of testing the waters of seeing, what is it going to be like? Is the show going to be successful? I'm not going to make a huge investment, but I can make a rental investment in the show, whether it's an inline or an island, and see how that works. So, rentals were increasing at double-digit rates anyway, but now post-COVID, if I had to guess, half the exhibits on the show floor post-COVID will be rentals, easily rentals.
Wow. It'll be interesting to follow that prediction and see how close you are. And Kenji brings up another good point. We know there will be expectations of virtual participation opportunities. So, you and I talked about that the other day, about how the lessons learned in virtual are now going to be brought onto the show floor. And everybody who's been ranting and raving about, oh, virtual is just not the same. And it's like, yeah, but there's pieces that can definitely be enhanced, help enhance a booth.
Yes, and in the booth space itself, there's only so much information you can convey to someone. But in the virtual world, you have your entire catalog. You have all the products, you have all the services, you have everything. Every single video you've ever made can be within the virtual element. You cannot share that in the booth itself. So if you can somehow blend the actual physical booth itself with the actual virtual, for those people who are doing it, it'll be, I think in the long run, it'll be a much better experience for attendees. And not only because during the 3 or 4 days of the show, but the 365 days of the entire year where they can tap into it. It'll be curious if show organizers really keep that portal open for longer than the show, if they keep that portal open for months and months and months, so that exhibitors really can harvest leads for the entire year instead of just during that very short time frame.
Well, and it's been interesting to see how different shows are taking different approaches. Like, I'm participating in a show next month that they're going to leave theirs open till the end of January. There was one this summer that left theirs open till the end of the summer, but then after Labor Day, they switched it over to where it's a benefit for it's an association. So it's a benefit for their paid members. And then anybody else could pay to have access for the whole year to the platform. And the thing is that it's not just when they do that, then it can't just be the show pieces. There's got to be stuff that's added and changed. And,
Yep.
so that particular show is also doing different webinars and things throughout the year so that they've still got that engagement to get people involved. But I've been trying to tell show organizers this for a decade of, why not? Why limit your show to 4 days? Have it be at least semi-participatory all year round. So
you have another question?
Well, Rama says that she's doing a lot more with QR codes now because it's so much easier now that they're built into almost every mobile device. And I know it's true. I don't even have to wake my phone up. I just, turn on the camera, shoot the code, and it immediately says, oh, and it recognizes it. So Chuck says designing booths with size flexibility will now be key. The ability to add on and expand as restrictions lighten up is something to think about, which again goes back to that rental idea that they can adapt from one show to the next as things change or as the city changes, because the regulations will be different.
And will North American regulations remain the same? That's another key, is we've all been restricted by North American regulations as opposed to Asian or European.
Mm-hmm.
Will show organizers, will general show contractors be forced to modify those regulations because of COVID? Because of the ability of people wanting to be in the aisle and not being in the booth itself. One of the things that I've thought of is, will it change graphics? We always think of graphics as billboards in our industry. You don't want a lot of clutter. You just want a big message, and that kind of sparks a conversation. But if people aren't coming in your booth as much and you have to convey a lot of details, do those graphics become more granular than they have in the past? I don't know.
Yeah. Or is there a way to blend the two where you've still got the big graphic, but then you've got, and I know you guys are great at this, of having like the little pop out signage as well. And then Al says companies will use what they learned from experimenting with virtual events and apply their learnings to enhance their physical events. Okay, Al, that's the quote of the week here. I think that is so key. It's like, everybody needs to stop complaining about virtual and start learning from it and incorporating the best pieces of it. Because and I've seen some events that have done bang up job with virtual. So, it is possible to really make it creative. And, you actually brought out the other day one of the ideas that you had about bringing virtual onto the show floor. You want to share that?
So you're going to have to prompt me on that.
Oh, about the videos.
Oh, I've worried for years, and people have heard me say this before, that, as video becomes much more prominent, as an exhibit builder, should we be worried at some point that a 10 by 10 booth is simply a 10 by 10 video wall, or a 10 by 20 video wall, or an island? Because if the video can be sophisticated and entertaining, you're really communicating all the information that you have for that in that video wall. Now, videos have gotten kind of a bad rap because what's on the show floor is so bad typically, but that doesn't mean that videos are bad. But I think there will be a much higher utilization of video walls in the booth space as they try to communicate without the touch element.
Well, and as you said, the bar is going to be set much higher. I mean, if somebody's going to do a video wall, they better do it right. Or it's going to become a sea of video walls, and only the best will get any attention.
Exactly. So it'll be a show hall of YouTube videos, all competing for eyeballs. Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the stuff of nightmares right now, I think. We better do some really serious educating with people before we turn them loose on that. Well, Mel, I know we covered a lot of different topics. We got a lot of great discussion from the audience. Any other points things that we forgot to bring up that so far that you wanted to mention?
The only other things that people need to think about, and Rama will really kind of key into this, is storage, because there has to be a place for all these hygiene products that we're expected to have in the booth and wipe down, that exhibit designers and exhibitors need to think about storage much more so than they have in the past. So that's a simple one, but it's something to really think about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of different things. And we haven't even gotten into the whole cleaning aspect side of things. I mean,
No.
that's another thing that the exhibitors need to definitely get up to speed on. Rama says, how do you see small exhibitors with very limited staff handling a hybrid show on the virtual side of it? The people in front of you have to come first, but how do we handle our virtual visitors?
I think most of the virtual visitors will be the people handling the virtual exhibitors will be back home. They'll be the
Mm-hmm.
employee back in the office, interacting with them within chat or being able to send them PDFs or other information or communicating to the staff on the show floor to let them know they've got someone waiting, and so that they can then they can kind of switched over to an actual live presentation as opposed to the virtual. I think there'll be a lot more coordination. There'll have to be coordination between the home team and the team on the show floor itself.
Well, and I know as far as the event that I'm doing next month, the way some of the exhibitors, of course, this one is all virtual, but the way some of the exhibitors are going to handle it is they're actually going to be, because it's a retail type show. So they're going to be in their stores. And so their virtual booth is just going to be their camera on in their store. So, maybe as they're ringing somebody up in the store, they're actually talking to that person and actually kind of talking to the person in the virtual booth as well. And, so it would be more like that experience where everybody feels like they're all in the booth at the same time. So,
yeah. So imagine standing in front of that small booth space, and the person is saying, so can you tell me a little more clearly how that product works? And it switches over to a video of someone in the factory who's actually in real time explaining how that product works, showing it being turned on, some of the features that are happening that you didn't have to have in the booth. And it's not a video, it's just a real-time presentation. Now, obviously that means that bandwidth has to increase significantly within the pool halls, but if they can manage that, there's no reason you can't have that kind of coordination between what's happening on the show floor in the virtual world and in real time.
Yeah. And Rama, I get it. She says, I don't have employees back in the office. I'm truly a small company where it's just me. I get that. So we're just going to have, but Rama, we entrepreneurs, we're scrappy and we're creative and innovative. And I know we can all figure out ways that we can make this work. So, and probably better than some of the big companies, honestly. So, again, it's another one of those things where I keep telling people, take time or take advantage of the time now to figure these kinds of things out and think, that's why I wanted to have this discussion because, it's not like you got to have a booth ready to go next week. You've got some time. So figure it out and get really creative. And then we've got another comment from Kevin. Number one lesson learned the past 6 months from client feedback. Virtual exhibits are a great digital marketing tool for off the show floor uses. Virtual shows overall have lots of issues to overcome, but the virtual exhibits are turning into great winners for markets to use in other avenues. Yes. And that's what I'm trying to tell people all the time is like, this is a new tool. This is something that we have that we can actually use in whatever manner. So
but the key to that is that virtual exhibit has to be portable in the sense that it has to be mobile from show to show, and the client has to be able to control that experience and control that software or that URL. If that virtual exhibit is tied to the show and can only be used at that show, they're at a disadvantage, and they need to push back at the show as far as having the ability to have a virtual exhibit that's not linked exclusively to that experience.
Well, and the thing I just taught an exhibitor workshop for a virtual show last week. And one thing I told them was, I had checked out a lot of their websites ahead of time. And I said, you guys have assets already. They had great video. They had some case study videos. They had testimonials. They had, tours of their factories or whatever. Exhibitors need to just start compiling a list of all their assets, and the virtual booth or the virtual booth tour or whatever is one of those assets. So compile all those assets, and then the next time you've got a virtual show coming up that you need things to put in your virtual booth, you've got all of that ready to go, and you just pick and pull and figure out what's going to be the best for that audience. So
Well, and the great thing is that there's a level playing field between the company that does revenue of 30 million and the company that does revenue of 300
Yes.
million. At this point, there's a level playing field, and those companies that are the most creative are going to win that battle.
And Ramah says, plug for classic exhibits and my pals at Northwest Exhibits. You have absolutely awesome virtual exhibits.
Thank you very much, Ramah.
So there you go. And then also back to that, Ramah, what you said earlier about being a small exhibitor, those of us that are, a solopreneur with a 10 by 10, we have a level playing field as well in the virtual platform because, some of the smaller exhibitors I've seen really knock it out of the park because, again, they got very creative. So, I think the potential is so huge going forward. I know that we're all just like, we're like, pacing to get started, like I'm not a horse racer, but like the horse getting ready to start the race, the adrenaline and everything. That's how we feel. But it's like, let's get it all put together and get a plan mapped out. So Mel, thank you so much for joining us for this. I mean, I know we could go on talking for a long time. Maybe we'll bring you back for another virtual lunch and we'll continue. But thanks to everybody for joining us today. Mel, you always, you spark so many great ideas. I really appreciate you being a part of our discussion today and being our guest.
Well, thank you, Marlys. And for the group out there, there's never been a better time to hit the reset button in our industry and change some things that have been bothering you and bothering all of us for years and years and years. This is the perfect opportunity to make it better for everyone.
Yes, yes. As I keep saying, take advantage of the great pause. All right. Well, quick reminder to everybody that we will take off next week. We will be back on November 10th with virtual lunch. And so have a great Halloween weekend and a great time coming up for the next couple of weeks. And we will get back together and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody. Bye.